Very good. Good morning, everyone. You can see my voice is kaput. It's been not just this weekend, but this whole week has been a lot of talking and also some other things going on in our lives that have been pretty stressful. So it's taken its toll. Interesting. I feel fine. It's just I can't talk. But so this will be a long dharma talk. Just kidding. Try to keep it succinct. Last time I spoke about the koan, the question of what to eat. I try not to come down on it too hard, one side or the other, but to keep it as a koan. What do we eat? And this time I like to offer the koan of how do we be eaten? How do we be eaten? Right? Anybody want to offer some thoughts on that? Can you allow yourself to be eaten? To be food? Can you allow yourself to be food? How good do you taste? This is what the word kenosis means. Kenosis means self-sacrifice, sacrifice, emptying of the self. To another way to think about it is abandoning ego. So I would like to offer some examples of what this is. In the Hebrew Bible, let's talk about a evolution of what sacrifice means. In the Hebrew Bible, we have offerings that the Israelites make to God as a sacrifice. So you get goats, cows, and other things put on an altar and sacrificed. And that's the way there is communication with God, is through that sacrifice. The sacrifice atones for one's sins. As we move ahead a little bit with the coming of Jesus, we've got God actually becomes the sacrifice through Jesus. God becomes the sacrifice. So first there's this, and this is not unique to Christianity or Judaism or other. I'm thinking about this, and I ask you to think about this as an evolution in human thought, because it happens within the Indian subcontinent as well. There are sacrifices, the fire sacrifice in the Vedas. And then with the Upanishads, it gets reversed. The people doing the sacrifice become the sacrifice. So, but in the West, in the Western religious tradition, it starts out with the sacrifice being made to God. Same thing in Hinduism, sacrifices being made to God. And then there's a change. God becomes the sacrifice within Christianity. In the Hindu tradition, you have a wonderful story called the Purusha Sukta. The Purusha, have you heard of it? No? Okay, the Purusha. Purusha is the original being. And this being sacrifices itself in order to create the world. He offers himself or herself up as a sacrifice, and the limbs of this being become certain parts of the world that we see. The world itself is born from sacrifice, according to the Hindu tradition. This kenosis is another word for this, kenosis. In the early, it feels so good. in the early story of creation from the Hebrew Bible, God creates the world and then steps back in a sense in one aspect of the story. So God creates the world, and then God is separate from it. Kind of the other version of the story is slightly different, but in this one story that I think a lot of us are familiar with, there is God is light, water, earth, animals, humans, and then God kind of exits. In the Purusha Sukta, the devas create the world, the gods create the world through sacrifice, and they reside in what they create. The world is created. And so a river is both created by God and is God. Same with the earth. There's a wonderful tale in Buddhism also about sacrifice. And in the Buddhist tradition, sacrifice becomes the means to Buddhahood. So I would love for you all to read this story about Prince Mahasattva. Have you heard of Prince Mahasattva? This is a classic Buddhist Jataka. Did you know what the Jataka tales are? Tell us.
What? Oh.
What are the Jataka?
Oh, I just heard of them, actually. I don't know what they are.
You don't know them? Nobody knows? Jataka tales are the stories of the previous lives of the Buddha. So, here's the wonderful thing about maybe a way to understand Buddhist practice as well as Hindu practice is through the worldview of reincarnation that we get recycled again and again. And this is only the present reincarnation, but we've been here before, many bodies, many lifetimes before. We just keep coming back. So from a practice perspective, if you die, that's okay. You're going to come back. And so it's good to, your state of mind in practice will determine your next rebirth, and maybe you get even a better rebirth. So this is the story of Prince Mahasattva, an earlier incarnation of the Buddha. So let's look at this. I pulled it up on my computer, and you guys can read it to each other and use your voice. Okay. It's a very famous story, and as it's read, as you read, there is reference to cave paintings in China where this story is depicted. So read with it. You could be my voice. Read light, strong, and resonant. And maybe each person reads 2 paragraphs and passes it to the next person. We'll just go around.
Before he was born as Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha's soul accumulated much virtue from his many previous lifetimes as various selfless beings. Jataka tales are stories about the past lives of the Buddha. These stories tell of the Buddha's previous incarnations and the ways in which he accumulated his good karma through sacrifice.
A lot of this I can't pronounce because this is my first time being here. So.
Jen, can you help?
Yeah.
It's Dunhuang?
This Dunhuang mural depicts a famous Jataka tale from Prince
Mahasattva.
Yeah. Painted on the eastern wall of Mogao Cave 428 is a mural of the entire Jataka tale in 3 registers.
So the Dunhuang caves, famous caves in China with lots of different Buddhas and images on the walls and stuff.
The mural begins on the right-hand side of the first register. 3 young men kneel before a blue pagoda with their hands pressed together in the form of genuflection. 2 regal figures set inside the blue pagoda. They are presumably the king and the queen. They wave farewell to the 3 young men who are presumably their sons.
In the next few scenes, the 3 brothers head out to the forest to go on hunt. Deer and tigers populate the forest, while tree and mountain range frame each scene. The undulating multicolored mountains are scaled to be
You can do it with 2 fingers like
smaller than the trees, animal, and human figures. The story continues to the second register, this time beginning on the left-hand side. The 3 brothers continue further into the forest when they descend from the horses to take a rest at the base of some mountains.
So one of the 3 brothers is a previous incarnation of the Buddha.
During their rest, the brothers spot a tigress with 7 baby cubs. The tigress is depicted with her mouth open and painted in dreary shades with drooping limbs. She stares at baby cubs who prance around her feet. She looks ready to eat her own children.
The brothers convene to discuss the matter of the tigress. Not wanting to watch a mother devour her own children, the brothers resolve to help her find food. However, there does not appear to be any food nearby. Prince Mahasattva suddenly comes up with an idea. He keeps it to himself and tells his 2 brothers to leave the forest to find some food while he stays behind to watch over the tigers.
After his brothers leave, Prince Mahasattva strips off his clothes and lies down in front of the tigress, offering himself to the tigress. He decides to offer himself as food for the tigress so that she wouldn't have to eat her own children. The tigress sniffs at his body, but makes no move to harm him, even though she is starving. Do you want to do this course?
Of course. Here you go, buddy.
Sure, thank you. When we offer help to someone and they are unable to accept what is offered, it's a chance for us to feel good about having attempted goodness without losing anything. We can think to ourselves, well, we tried to help. In the case of Prince Mahasattva, he understood that good intentions alone would not save a life. It would take determined and complete self-sacrifice to save the tigers. Realizing that the tigers will not eat him alive, Prince Mahasattva climbs to the edge of a cliff, cuts open his neck, and throws himself off the ledge. With his neck bleeding profusely, his body drops in front of the tigress and her cubs.
At Prince Mahasattva's second attempt to offer his body, the tigers devour him as nourishment. Snaking across and down the 3 registers, the story continues on the 3rd register by beginning on the right-hand side again. Prince Mahasattva's brothers return and they understand what happened in their absence when they see the bones left behind by the tigress and her cubs.
The brothers' bodies contort across the scene in shock, anguish, and grief in reaction to the death of their 3rd sibling. The 2 brothers practically fly back to the palace on their horses to tell the king about what happened to Prince Mahasattva. The story looks like that. The story actually ends on the topmost right corner of the image, returning to the place where the 2 princes found their brother's corpse. After reporting to the king, the family builds a stupa over Prince Mahasattva's bones and hair to commemorate his selfless actions. Do you want to go into the stupa?
No, that's good. You got the gist of the story. So, the point of that is to show the Buddhist version of it, and the idea of sacrifice really runs throughout Buddhism as well, and it's meant to inspire us to also not fling ourselves off a cliff, but to live in a manner that we allow ourselves to be food. And you can take that literally, but it's not meant to be literal. And in the end, it does become literal, doesn't it? You do become food for the earth. No one's out there food for the earth right now. So the question is whether we want to participate in it consciously or we want to resist it. Whether we want to participate being food for others or resist it and become food anyways. There's no escape. That's the good news. So in one of the messages here, in order for life to flourish, something has to give itself up, give life. Early Hinduism, you have sacrifices made to a god or gods. It's kind of called an external, the external sacrifice. Food might be put on the fire and that smoke goes up, and that's how it was communicated. But later Hinduism, the Upanishads, you have this sacrifice. Continues, but it becomes internalized. So through meditative practice, the ego is sacrificed. That's the ultimate sacrifice. It's to sacrifice our egos. And a book that I've been studying with my world religions class is called A New Climate for Christology. The author just recently passed away, Sally McFaig. She says, if we want the earth, this is World Peace Day. She says, if we want the earth to flourish, then we need to take seriously kenosis, or sacrifice. And she makes the case that she's a Christian theologian. She makes the case that the old story of Jesus sacrificing himself for our sins is no longer a helpful story for our society. We don't have to do anything except to accept Jesus, and then we earn a ticket, so to speak, to heaven. She says the new story is kenosis, self-sacrifice, is how the universe operates from the smallest atom to all the way up there. In other words, what Jesus did was normal, and it's something that we're all called to do. It happens on a microscopic level. Atoms are constantly changing and transforming, dying, if you will. And the molecules, the microscopic beings constantly being eaten, and they give rise to the grasses, the plants. And the plants are constantly giving themselves over to corn and soy is every year. It's dying, and who eats it? We eat it, the cows eat it. We eat the cows are sacrificing themselves. And through the example of God sacrificing him or herself, that's meant to be an example for human beings. We're the only species that has an opportunity to make sacrifice conscious or not. In other words, we can willingly allow ourselves to be the sacrifice, or we could fight it. But either way, it's the law of nature. That's how evolution works, is through sacrifice. Over generations and generations and generations, things change. And we're no different from the rest of the natural world. So as humans, we have the option to consciously participate in this emptying of the self, or to do it unconsciously. if we do it unconsciously, what arises? Resistance, anger, hatred, greed. We think that through our greed, we're going to extend our life somewhat, or maybe attain immortality, or our anger is going to pay our own entrance into sacrifice. She says, self-emptying, quote, self-emptying love is not added to existence, but defines it from the very beginning. Here we see the connections with life-death symbiotic patterns of evolution, as well as the epitome of kenosis in the life and death of Jesus Nazareth. Life is lived in relationship to others. We only are because of of the relationships we are in. And think about that from as infants coming right out of the womb. The infant doesn't know it exists until it's touched. And we forget that as we get older, but touch is absolutely primary to knowing that we actually exist. We touch each other physically, but then as we get older, we do it in other ways. We touch each other spiritually, psychologically. We're constantly touching each other. We're informed. It's like ants in an anthill. They communicate through their pheromones. The bees in the beehive communicate with each other. They touch each other, and the pheromones communicate what's going on. And then by that, they make decisions. And Sangha is like that too. We see we're like a community of bees. We see what's going on in the Sangha, and then we know what to do based on what other people are doing. We touch each other in a symbolic sense. Now, how do we I want to give some examples, 2 examples from the Zen tradition. How do we put this into practice? How do we make kenosis practical for us? And the Zen tradition is replete with examples of kenosis. So I want to read 2 excerpts from Stephanie Kaza. She's a practicing Soto Zen Buddha. She says, my practice, maybe I'll ask Corson, if you could read just this paragraph.
My practice of writing with trees is based in the Zen form of shikantaza, just sitting. I spend time in silence, close to trees, doing my best to be simply present with the trees as other, aware of my thoughts, moods, and projections. I had no idea at first how this would work, but I persisted in the experiment. The writing became an excuse to listen for a call from the trees, in whatever form it took. I did not go to the trees with an agenda or story in mind, but chose rather to see what would unfold by being completely present in the specific place and moment.
So this is from a much older book, The Attentive Heart: Conversations with Trees. It's got beautiful images of trees in it that are drawn, and she has this profound love for trees. Let's read some excerpts from this one chapter called The Golden Time. The Golden Time. This one paragraph. Side on.
Now the days are growing shorter and the sky is speaking of winter. Change hangs in the air with a question mark. The harvest is in and the season of waiting begins. This is the tender time of year when everything drops away. The trees are left bare and empty, only skeletons of continuity remain. It is a tender time because the impermanence of things is so visible, so unavoidable. The winter heart feels the lengthening darkness and the turning of the sun.
Now begin to notice how she incorporates her understanding and how she speaks about trees here. I think the point here is that our language betrays how we think and how we act. And this is giving us some examples of how we can think and speak in ways that promote a conscious kenosis as opposed to an unconscious.
I am noticing this turning in the company of magnificent ginkgo. With a canopy spread of close to 100 feet, this tree is one of the most commanding individuals on the UC Berkeley campus. Its bright fall color lights up the space between the dark green redwoods and the pale granite building. The ginkgo is a campus landmark, well loved by those who watch it change each autumn. In the last few hours of afternoon light, the ginkgo is sunbathing in the warm golden rays. The leaves have begun to say goodbye, fading from green to gold. The whole tree shimmers with yellow.
Students walk by on the path, lost in equations and other philosophies. The light is an event above their heads. Few stop to look up or notice. For a month, I have been anticipating this golden time. Last fall, I taught an evening class in the nearby building, and every week we watched the ginkgo slip closer to winter. By the end of the course, the tree had shown us its green finery, golden halo, and finally its elegant skeleton. The course was a botany class for garden volunteers, charged with communicating their love of plants to visitors. As a representative of the oldest living tree species, the ginkgo was an inspirational teaching companion. Though they no longer exist in the wild, they are favorites among horticulturists for their glorious color and elegant fan-shaped leaves. The 150 million year lineage of ginkgo ancestry only exists today because the Chinese preserved these trees in ancient sacred groves.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's good. 150 million years old. Just get that in perspective. Humans have been around for about 40,000 years. And we think we're the center. So this is it's a shift of perspective. You see that kind of shift of perspective and the appreciation that is reflected in her writing. Here's one from a famous Japanese writer, Matsuo Basho. Oku no Hoso Michi, the narrow road to Oku. After crossing Rubena Mountain and the valley of Kurikara, we reached Kanazawa on the 15th of the 7th month. We shared lodgings with a merchant named Kasho from Osaka. I had heard vague reports of one Isho, a man devoted to our art, he's a poet, who had established something of a reputation. And Basho, he went around as a mendicant, writing poems here and there. That was his life. It's just amazing. I had heard vague reports. Okay. He had died young in the winter of the previous year on the occasion of a memorial service offered by his elder brother. I wrote, Tsukan mo ugoke, waga naku koe wa aki no kaze. Shake your tune. Reply. My voice that weeps for you is the autumn wind. My voice that weeps for you is the autumn wind. There's no ego. He's connecting himself with the wind. On being invited to a thatched hut, Aki Suzushi, Tegoto ni muke ya uri nasubi. The cool of autumn, every hand start peeling melons and eggplants. On the road, Aka Akato, Hiwa Tsure Naku Mo Aki no Kaze. Redly, redly, the sun shines heartlessly, but the wind is autumnal. That's a beautiful image from that. Redly, redly, the sun shines, but the wind is autumnal. And just a little bit more here and we'll close. At a place called Komatsu, Little Pines, Shiorashiki, Naya Komatsu Fuku, Hagi Suzuki. What a charming name. Little Pines. The wind blows through Little Pines, Clover, and Suzuki. We went to worship at the Tada Shrine in Komatsu. Sanemori's helmet and fragments of his brocade robe are preserved there. I was told that long ago, while he was serving the Minamoto clan, he received these gifts from Yoritomo. Indeed, these are no ordinary samurai's possessions. The helmet is engraved with a chrysanthemum arabesque pattern inlaid with gold from the frontlet to the aventail. And there are projecting horns on the dragon's crest. I gather that Kiso Yoshinaka, after killing Sanemori in battle, offered the helmet to the shrine together with his prayers for victory. The account of how Higuchi no Jiro, as Yoshinaka's envoy, brought these offerings here is vividly described in the shrine's records. So in other words, this samurai warrior killed somebody in battle, and he was presented with this famous helmet from another warlord or another very powerful person. So it was very prestigious. And then he gives this helmet to this particular shrine. And here's the poem that is written by Basho. Muzanyana kabuto no shita no kirigirisu. Alas, for mortality, underneath the helmet, a grasshopper. Look at this image. Alas, for mortality, underneath the helmet. What's that beautiful haiku? Underneath the helmet, a grasshopper. All right. So kenosis, give up our ideas of our self at the center of the world and in charge of things. Give up that idea. See ourselves as dependent on others. That's Buddhism in a nutshell. Thank you. You're welcome for questions.
Anybody have questions, comments, thoughts on that? It was kind of a scary start. You know, feeding yourself to the tiger. But it came back around to this thing that we practiced all the time is, you know, trying to give up the self for the sake of others.
Mm-hmm.
Enlightenment.
We do it if whether we know it or not, we do it. And all I'm saying is, let's know that we're doing it. We're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're already doing it. And sitting Zazen is doing it. Doesn't matter what you think. You're doing it. Whether you like it or not. That's faith and mind. It's not about a choice. That's what life is. That's what life does. That's what it means to be alive. Think of all the sacrifice that took place for us to be. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Everything sacrificed for us. This moment is a result of a sacrifice. The sun, there's a cosmologist, Brian Swim, he says, the sun up in the sky is sacrificing itself every moment, every time it emits light. Billions and trillions of hydrogen molecules are bursting into flame. That's why we get heat every moment. The sun is the supreme example of sacrifice. And just a small little sliver of that sunlight gets to the earth and provides life. Right? So, what should we do when we die? We're already, I don't know, Is it really that scary? We've been dying the whole time. We can die with a smile, but it's really difficult sometimes because, to be honest, life throws things that are out down our way. Part of the result of this throat is because I resisted being a sacrifice, and it came anyway. That's what happens. Yeah. But this is just a little spin. It's a little spin on it. It's not meant to make us feel happy about it, but we can. It's part of life, and I think our resistance to it creates a lot more pain for all of us. Think about how much we fight in order to get what we want. Is it worth it?
Thanks, Daishin. So, kenosis is sacrificing yourself or oneself back to the earth or to others. And so, in Zazen is doing that, whether we think it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you do that, it helps you get rid of your ego, or it helps the ego not your ego.
That's what we're doing. We're sacrificing our ego.
So Zazen is sacrificing our ego.
Absolutely.
And that's kenosis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for
Oh, he's feeling better now.
Zazen is preparation for death. We practice. My teacher would say we practice to have a good death. It's turning it around. We can enjoy it. We can enjoy this life. That's the other side of it, is enjoying our life. That's what the Buddha taught, First Noble Truth, there is suffering in the form of old age, sickness, and death, right? Those are the 5 awareness. I'm of the nature to grow old. I'm of the nature to get sick. I'm of the nature to die. I'm of the nature to lose everything and everybody. My only true belongings are my karma. That's it, right? Second Noble Truth, there's a cause for suffering. The Heart Sutra says there is no birth and there is no death. We think, so death is a concept. That's where we get lost. That's why we need Zen too. We actually don't realize death is a concept. It's a construct. The self is a construct. And we feed it this idea that it's real and it persists. And the third noble truth, there's a way out of suffering. That's the good news. What do? Right view is number 1. Catching up with, there is no view. That's right view. Right? As soon as we form a view, we've got a wrong view. We have a view about a living being, a lifespan. The Diamond Sutra says we're not bound by a being, this lifespan. This body is not me. I am not this body. I have never been born, and I will never die. So we got to practice that. Right? Thich Nhat Hanh says, a cloud never dies. It just becomes rain. Feeds the earth. Becomes the grass. Feeds the cows. Feeds the humans. And we eat it. And we feed our children. Right? Literally. What does a mother do for the infant? They're feeding their children themselves. Right? We forget. We think we can get out of it, so we get infant formula. Right? We think we can get out of it. Let's get infant formula. Well, it costs more money. It's not as good for the environment. It's not as, the mother enjoys, apparently, I don't know. Mom enjoys, gets some endorphins from feeding the baby their milk. It's a good feeling. Does death have to be miserable? No. Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes maybe.
So I was thinking of a different level of kenosis. Kind of tied it in and look at a different way from that is Dana, Dana. And there's people who give themselves reluctantly or question about their giving, and then there's an ultimate sacrifice, giving up their life for whatever cause it is. And when 20 years ago when I was in medical school, and I was working with cadaver. Those are the people who just ultimately sacrifice without question, with some trust that they would give their body for some for science or for some cause. So I think if the practice would make us realize that level, that we do that with the ultimate giving. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I love that example.
And the other thing, I'm not sure how it would tie up with your talk today, kenosis, but talking about wisdom of tree, one thing I really like about Japanese culture through the art of bonsai or their garden is that they appreciate the tree imperfection. So the beautiful bonsai tree are the one that's not perfect. Does that make sense? And so it's okay to accept whatever you are, wherever you are, that's okay. And that can be unique, that can be beautiful. So,
and the cadaver, I mean, it's thanks to people giving up their lives to science that you get to be the doctor and help other people. And we learn from these cadavers more and more information, how to help in different ways. Bodies, even through death, people are constantly giving. We learn about disease through death. Some people die before they get the cure, but the cure comes out of the death.
Any other thoughts or questions? We can do the closing chant, call and response. Then we'll have a few answers. The many beings are numberless, vowing to carry them across.
The many beings are numberless, vowing to carry them across.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road.
Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all.
Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all.
Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through.
Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through.
Thank you very much. Thank you.